Another season, another year of Ferrari disappointment. It seems once again that Ferrari are under-delivering on their promises to be challenging at the front of the grid in 2023. Most passionately supported with the greatest resources seem to be continuing their rut of not challenging for a world title, with the last time being 2012. You then need to go all the way back to 2008 for the last time Ferrari won the Constructors' Championship. In 2022, they struggled mainly due to unreliability and strategy errors, but this year seems like a bit of continued unreliability, but mainly a simple lack of pace. Following two underwhelming results in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, their issues seem fundamental, and it's clear that Ferrari have a lot of work to do and some tough decisions need to be made in Maranello. But Ferrari isn't your average team. They are unique for their added pressure from the ruthless Italian media and the lack of stability back in Maranello. And well, this could only make the season tougher. So what exactly is going wrong at Ferrari, and do they have any hope of salvaging it this season? Now, it's important to note Ferrari's 2023 started on a much more positive note. Firstly, at the reveal of the SF23, they smashed it out of the park with a track run straight after the launch in front of a full grandstand of Ferrari fans. And the feeling around the team at the launch was incredibly positive. They felt they had actually overachieved throughout the winter break and were in an even better position than what they planned for. And so they went into pre-season testing with their heads held high. And well, testing was decent with no major positive or negative surprises, going through the usual pre-season motions with no thrills or frills. However, it was hard to ignore the speed and performance of the Red Bull car. But nonetheless, they came out of testing looking fairly reliably the second best team, so it was overall a positive test. But once the cars entered into competition at the Bahrain and Saudi Arabia Grand Prix, this optimism quickly evaporated, leaving a team in shambles, unaware of why they are so much slower than the rest of the frontrunners. In Bahrain, they took P4 and a DNF, welcoming back the engine gremlins they struggled with in 2022. Then 2 weeks later in Saudi Arabia, finished 6th and 7th simply due to lack of pace. So what changed in 1 week between testing and the first race to result in such a dramatic change in pace of the car and mood of the team? Well, there's three main issues that the team are facing: unreliability, lack of pace, and issues internally at the team. I'll start this somewhat more bleak tricolore with unreliability. And well, their woes in this department started at the Bahrain Grand Prix when on lap 40, Charles Leclerc pulled to the side of the track from 3rd place with what looked like an engine-related failure. Before the race had even begun, Ferrari swapped out Leclerc's control electronics and engine store components as a precaution. And well, this was essentially what caused his retirement. It was an engine store and control unit failure. Now heading into Saudi Arabia, because they had already swapped out this piece twice, once before the race and once after the retirement, Leclerc received a 10-place grid penalty for the Saudi race. This is because you are only allowed 2 energy store components throughout the season, and so already within one race, Ferrari were already facing grid penalties, something that doesn't happen usually until at least halfway through the season. Now, while energy store and control unit failures were not what plagued Ferrari in 2022, it shows an even more worrying tendency to suffer from unreliability, especially as this was their main priority over the winter. But following Saudi Arabia, the unreliability was much improved. They did make precautionary changes to both Leclerc's and Sainz's car before the weekend, but apart from some clutch problems faced by Leclerc in FP2, it was a much more reliable weekend. Come the end of the race, both cars finished with no obvious unreliability issues, so that's one of the very few positives they can take from this weekend. Right, so unreliability is a bit of a problem, but the more worrying aspect is their lack of raw pace. In Bahrain, they were about 3/10 off the Red Bulls, with Leclerc doing only one run. But in the race, despite having new softs compared to Verstappen's used softs, he was still losing 6/10 a lap to Verstappen. And Sainz wasn't much better, struggling massively in the final stint on the hard tyres with high degradation, resulting in Alonso and almost Hamilton getting past him. But the next round in Saudi Arabia was a much different circuit, and had the opportunity to show some improvements in the gap to Red Bull, but in fact what happened instead was the complete opposite. Initially, one lap pace was good with Leclerc qualifying 2nd before his grid penalty, and his first stint on the soft tyres was strong, making quick passes through the field, but it was the second stint on the hard tyres where they simply didn't have the pace. Granted, they were affected by the timing of the safety car, but it was clear they were unable to challenge the cars ahead. Now, there is a possibility that they had to turn down the engines to prevent a failure, possibly why they had no unreliability. But when asked, Vassuer seemed to dodge the question and not give a straight answer, so we'll have to see. Overall, the only thing reliable about Ferrari is where it stands in the pecking order, and that's clearly behind Mercedes, Aston Martin, and of course Red Bull. And then finally, if unreliability and lack of pace wasn't enough, they are also facing issues internally regarding the management of the team. It is clear there is a lot of discontent back in Maranello, with the Italian media very vocal about the disarray within the team. Firstly, this all began with Mattia Binotto leaving the team, which caused a change in leadership for the first time in 4 years. Then more recently, the head of strategy, Inaki Rueda, was replaced by Ravin Jain. Head of vehicle concept David Sanchez left the team, as well as several other team members down the food chain. This has since caused fractures to appear, with reported uncertainty around racing director Laurent Mekies and head of chassis Enrico Cardile. And well, with all these high-profile uncertainties and departures, questions must be asked surrounding who will take the technical development of the car forward throughout the season. But I feel this goes much deeper. It's unlikely all these changes were under the direction of Vassuer, given it would be a bold statement only a few months into his tenure. Rather, you wonder whether these decisions are rather from the higher-ups in Ferrari. And one aspect where this has already proved an issue is with Charles Leclerc. Despite gaining more trust for the team with the arrival of Vassuer, the previous team boss at Sauber in 2018, all these changes have cast some doubts in Leclerc's mind. So much so that he's reportedly spoken directly to Ferrari president John Elkann about his concerns. Question is, how much longer will he hold faith in the team before jumping ship? So Ferrari's pre-season hopes and optimism has crumbled within 3 weeks of the 2023 season beginning. In just 2 races they've been punished with a grid penalty due to unreliability and clearly don't have the race pace to rival Mercedes, Aston Martin and Red Bull. This is then compounded by the clear internal issues jeopardising their development direction for the season and possibly the future of their star driver. Questions need to be answered as the season progresses, such as can Ferrari get this under control quickly, and can Vassuer steady the ship back towards the front of the grid? But to me, it seems like another case of Ferrari being Ferrari. And once again, Ferrari fans need to have patience, but it can be tough to keep faith after 15 years of patience.